All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, today we are going to continue the tafsir that we were doing for this ayah, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu la tas'alu an ashya'a in tubda lakum tasukkum. And of course, we were going in details with this tafsir, so we did mention the reason for the revelation of this ayah, and we mentioned two reasons. We said one story was about a man asking who his prophet was, and the ayah was revealed, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu la tas'alu an ashya'n tubda lakum tasukum. And the second was the question that a man asked, well, where is going to be my final destination? And the Prophet ﷺ said, hellfire. And that's when the ayah was revealed. And another, of course, reason that was mentioned, that a man comes to the Prophet ﷺ and asks if whether وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered that people would go for Hajj, if whoever has the capacity to do so. A man asks, is it something that we have to do every single day? And he responded that if I would have said that you had to do this not every day, but every year, if I would have said yes, then it would have been obligatory to be performed every single year. And also another reason for the revelation for this ayah. Now, a very important question and a very important statement to mention, that scholars had differences of opinions in regards to an ayah. Can the same ayah be revealed at multiple times or not? Is that at all something that was proven to have happened before? Or is it that the ayah is revealed just once and the Prophet ﷺ is perhaps repeating the ayah at multiple times depending on the circumstances that basically unfolded in repeating the ayah? Does that mean it was revealed again? Or does that mean that the Prophet ﷺ was basically mentioning that ayah for the similar circumstance to let people learn from that ayah? So that's, I guess, within this debate right there. And we also said that another reason, Al-Hasan al-Basri had mentioned, that the Sahaba were asking about some things that were already, let's say, long gone. That was already changed. That was already something that it had ended with al-Jahiliyyah, so it wasn't something that was supposed to be brought back or even discussed. But you had some people still questioning about it. You want to keep in mind that the culture was still being practiced by many. Still practicing certain Jahiliyyah, and some have, I guess, had their Iman just completely flip the page of Jahiliyyah and just move on and not necessarily bring all the traces of their past with them. But you had others would still question, and some scholars actually said that the reason for the revelation is one of those reasons, at least, is that some were still asking about past practices of Jahiliyyah, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically taught them that this is something that is of the past. Don't ask and don't bring back a lot of those previous practices, and then perhaps it will harm you, that there would be some, let's call it, stronger and more stricter restrictions, and then end up making your life even harder by adding more regulations, more restrictions. So therefore, to mention this as one of the reasons of revelations mentioned. Another reason, so now we're at 4. Another reason that was mentioned. So I can see that some of you are questioning, well, was it 4 reasons to why this ayah was revealed? No. It's not 4 reasons why this ayah was revealed. It's that we had different narrations that spoke of the reason for the revelation of this ayah, and it is possible that it's one of these, or it is also possible that there could have happened a number of different issues, and then this ayah was revealed to cover these different instances that had a commonality of asking questions that if the revelations or the ayat were revealed to bring in more restrictions, it would definitely make their life harder. So a number of different issues possibly happened, and they all became perhaps the main, let's say, common reason, and this ayah was revealed to cover that one. The other reason that was mentioned is that they had asked about a past ritual that they were doing. And this past ritual was involving the way they dealt with different animals that, of course, that they had regarded as containing some sanctity, that they were supposed to be left in a certain way to show and resemble doing a certain practice for religious reasons, etc. And then therefore this ayah was coming in the context. So based on Ibn Mas'ud, he was basically considering that, hey, we've got the evidence that the context for this was to show that the previous practices, well, it's not just the previous practices, but anything of the like. So emphasize and kind of underline that anything of the like with it, because when you look at these ayat, you might say, well, we don't even know what al-Bahira, what is Sa'iba, even though we already know al-Bahira is an animal that would have a number of different female babies, and then they would basically chip or cut part of its ear, etc. But in that type of a religious practice in dealing with animals, that the whole idea is not necessarily to revive such practices, but it's working on paradigms. So when we're speaking about paradigms, we're speaking about a concept. So the concept of just creating a blasphemy, in other words, attributing any behavior, whether we're speaking about a ritual or whether we're calling a certain perhaps concept as, well, this is human rights, this is what defines women's rights, this is what defines ethics, this is what defines ritual, or this is what defines perhaps negative energy, positive energy, and all of these different things, just that the person or the whole idea is not based on wahi, that would actually fit within the same description, same practice as what the people of Quraysh were doing. So just keep that one in mind. It doesn't have to be that particular practice that they were doing, and therefore it's history, therefore the ayat are related to them, not to us. This would be a completely wrong interpretation, because the ayat were generally giving you and giving us the concept and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commented on the concept that anything that a person would attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or claim to being ethical, claim to being spiritual, claim to being something that probably protects you or whatever it is, and claiming that there's some hidden or some subliminal messages that are hidden in such a practice, or that there's something that is related to even the definition of justice, ethics, whatever it is, that if the person were to claim some sort of sanctity, some sort of even priority, or some sort of legislature or justice or whatever it is, that's a form of creating blasphemy, creating a lie, creating a delusion and a manipulation onto people and onto oneself. وَأَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. And the majority don't actually have the mind. And when it talks about the mind, meaning to see the patterns, to see what is called al-ashbah wal-nadha'ir, meaning the similar things, to see how things are defined, seeing the paradigms, seeing the actual reality of things, and not confuse the matter. So this is just Just a clarification right there, and certainly we said al-Qurtubi said, well, what we would find in a Sahih and al-Musnad is enough. What is Sahih and Musnad? Basically, what is authentic, and what was mentioned in regards to the story. A man comes up and says, "Who's my father?" and which basically was Abdullah ibn Hudhafa as-Sahmi. We know that piece of it, and we also had seen that this was narrated in Bukhari. So al-Qurtubi wanted to say, well, that's enough of a resource for us. But again, we could also say ويحتمل أن تكون الآية نزلت جوابا للجميع. And he said there's a possibility that the ayah was also revealed to answer these set of questions, and therefore it doesn't have to be for a particular incident. Okay, that's basically what we did last time, and there was a lot more to say, of course, because we also had the question, so if the ayah is saying لا تسألوا عن أشياء إن تبد لكم تسؤكم, does that mean we shouldn't be questioning things? Does that mean we shouldn't seek fatwa? Because if we are to seek a fatwa, if we are to seek questions or answers to our questions, then does this actually come in the real actual application of this ayah? لا تسألوا, don't ask questions, that if it was revealed to you, it might harm you. So a couple things to say here. Number one is that the Sahaba, they carried on the practice not to ask too many questions and to recognize that the adab is to apply as the Prophet ﷺ was teaching them. And I guess this is important. So not always, I know that in modern way of disciplining and raising children that you're supposed to explain everything to the children. That's not necessarily accurate in Islam. In Islam, discipline comes in two different ways. So just keep that one in mind. It's the same thing with parenting. One type, even when we're speaking about shuyukh, I think sometimes we have to have the adab of talab al-ilm. Sometimes it's important to know the reason behind certain practices, the reason behind certain orders, perhaps, but we also have to understand that sometimes the reason may not necessarily be something that the person himself might understand at that time, whether it's the lack of maturity or lack of experience, or perhaps the person is lacking maybe the complete data, the picture, to know and to have the explanation why this is good or bad for them. So there's this tazkiyah sometimes that would come from certain shuyukh that they may give type of a mentorship where they don't necessarily explain the reasons behind everything. We'll tell you, well, I want you, for example, to change your job. And you might question, well, why do I have to even listen to you? And why should I even change the job? Or why should I do this? This is really common in Sufi, in Sufi, I would say adab, in Sufi practices, where the sheikh is acting as the mentor. The sheikh, there are a number of reasons why the sheikh is seen in such a holy position, I would say, because of the whole concept of Gnosticism. They would consider that there are certain ranks, and every single rank is called a maqam, and therefore a person in maqam, let's say 12, is not like the person in maqam 33. The person in maqam 33 may actually reach a certain level of basically what they would call kashf. Okay, And what they mean by kashf is that this person that had reached the highest level of maqam had reached a level where they're capable of seeing and understanding something that is rather close from the divine. Now, that in itself is actually close to kufr, and certainly to believe that some particular figures that they might have had kashf, or that they might even know the future, or might know your past, or might know all these different things, can get us into going in the same path of a lot of different shirk religions without us realizing. It's Gnosticism. And we've had multiple cases, and I don't mean multiple cases, though, I mean multiple cases that had come to me at least, but I'm sure there's even more. I'll say one of those cases, there were these Sufi groups. They were called, it was the Naqshbandi Tariqa, and they had different bases, but it actually belonged to Nazim al-Haqqani, who was actually based in UK, London, UK. And he does have different areas in New York and different other places. But anyhow, one of the people, I don't want to necessarily say that Nazim al-Haqqani is doing that, but there was this man that was affiliated with him, who basically had multiple wives, more than 4, and well, at the same time it was 4, but he would even marry women outside of their iddah, would divorce the women from their husbands, tell them that there was a divine creed, that there was divine decree, that he basically had to divorce the woman from her husband and marry her because they were on a mission of this. And of course, certainly you could see the manipulation that can happen, becomes like a cult type of thing. And we did see that this went farther than just an issue of divorcing women or getting married to women before their iddah, but it was literally a cult where these people were not even praying. I'm not saying that all Sufis are like that, so don't misunderstand this generalization, please, but I am talking about the concept. I'm talking about the concept where some might use this type of لا تسألوا عن أشياء تبدى لكم تسؤكم, and take it out of context and say, well, we're here trying to teach them the adab, and therefore it's important, in order to not fall in such manipulations, is to take the time to learn Islam. And I would recommend learning it from multiple scholars and not necessarily one scholar. When you learn it from multiple scholars, you would have the multiple scholars teach you what the last or the other one did not teach you, or what they might have made a mistake in. It is common, it can happen, that even if the person is a sheikh or a sheikha, that they can make a mistake, maybe misread something, maybe forget something. They're human beings, so having multiple shuyukh, just to make sure you're having the complete picture of understanding Islam, is extremely important. And at the same time, when we're speaking about doing the tazkiyah and the discipline piece of it, sometimes we can have certain adab where not always is it fully explained. When you look at the books of tazkiyah, they will go into certain adab that, especially about the mouth, especially about the lisan and ahwal al-lisan, and what is being talked about, and tongue, and what we would say, and how to question, and how to stay quiet for a long time, how to stay silent and work on silence, or working on perhaps being in your own home for as longer periods of time as possible, etc. So there are some certain practices, some certain discipline that some of the shuyukh might practice. And sorry, but a sneeze is going to be coming. It's gone. That some shuyukh of especially adab and tazkiyah and tarbiyah, they would be using in order to teach the person for a longer period of time how to maintain their akhlaq, how to maintain their adab, how to maintain their silence, how to maintain their integrity for longer periods. And sometimes they'll use different tools, for example, and say, well, I'm just going to give you this amount of money. I want you to limit your expenses, or I want you to limit the amount that you're spending, and I want you to reduce it. Let's say from let's just say $2,000. I want you to reduce it to let's say $1,300. And how am I going to do that? Well, they're probably your sheikh is probably working on teaching you how to limit rafahiyah, how to limit the different types of entertainment, how to limit the different types of dunya, etc. So by reducing probably, or asking you to reduce the expenses, and might actually ask you to probably bring along the bank statement, to look at your bank statement. And you might think that, okay, why are you looking at my bank statement? Right there, you're looking at my bank statement, and certainly this is a piece of privacy of mine. I don't have to show you my bank statement, but sometimes certain shuyukh might want to teach you, like, so you went to get coffee, and this is how much you spent to get coffee. You went to, these many restaurants. Maybe you could reduce the amount of dining out or dining in, and perhaps you might want to probably go to a different place and get what is necessary to make your own meals. And perhaps looking at that, well, let's also work on your diet. And probably just like when you go to a therapist or let's say nutritionist, and might tell you, well, how much are you eating? How many cups and how many grams are you consuming of these foods? And what is the amount? What are the different foods? Tell me from 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. or whatever you started your breakfast at until night. What did you eat, and how much, and how big was the portion, and etc. And you might say, well, wait a minute, that's my business. That's none of your business. Well, the nutritionist is not going to be capable of teaching you how to portion control unless she would ask you about all of these things. So when it comes to religious, that religious discipline, of course, religious discipline involves what you eat, what you would basically spend your money on, and who you're relating to, where you're hanging out, what you're looking at for entertainment and listening to for entertainment. It would involve everything. So the sheikh can sometimes actually get into certain areas that are rather be personal, and tell you, well, here's what I want you to limit. This type of a practice was and is still, let's say, common in a lot of Sufi areas. And I must say that this Sufi practice in having the sheikh mentor the murid, basically the student, basically this talib ilm, was definitely a very useful way. But it isn't until some of those shuyukh, they didn't act with their, let's call it tazkiyah, their religious integrity, and they ruined it for the other shuyukh. They ruined it for the other students. So it's important to not generalize, but it's also important to not fall a victim to those shuyukh that might actually not have the religious integrity and are using those positions of acting as a shaykh, but could nothing be but con artists, could nothing be but scammers. So we would have to be, let me say, wise and have the ilm to be able to differentiate between a con artist, a religious figure, a real teacher, between, of course, from a person that is playing the game of being a teacher when in reality they're nothing but scammers. Let's say it that way. So when we talk about لا تسألوا عن أشياء تبد لكم تسؤكم, what about parenting? With parenting, it's definitely important to, sometimes it really depends on the child's age, on their development, and certainly from one child to another, it differs. Sometimes we would have to just say, well, hey, just like we've got dunya and akhirah, there are certain limitations that I, as a parent, am trying to mentor you. I may not have the full explanation for you to understand yet, but inshallah, you will be capable of understanding completely. And just keep in mind that your brain does not fully develop until around age 26. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't necessarily mean that you understand everything fully, but I will let you know that experience is also important to let your children appreciate. Experience is also part of knowing what and where these practices or these choices or decisions are taking us. So sometimes we have to act upon respecting experience, and sometimes we just have to also teach our children that it's based on experience, and one day, inshallah, you will mature to understand why we had chosen this or why we had made this or that decision, and let them learn how to respect adults. This is part of parenting, how to respect adults, how to respect, and for the Prophet ﷺ said, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَا يُوَقِّرُ صَغِيرَهُمْ كَبِيرَهُم. The one that does that, where the young are not respecting the old, is not part of us. So respecting age, respecting experience is part of Islam, is part of adab al-Islam, is part of the manners that we need to teach them, even though we might not fully understand perhaps where and what they went through and where they lived their life and all the different perhaps contexts that they had learned their experience in, but it's important to teach them this adab. And certainly in our modern times, of course, the culture is to disrespect the older as being backward, as being too traditional, as being too old-fashioned, as not being up to date, as not being modern, as being not civilized, etc. And certainly that is not the Islamic vision. In Islam, to respect the experiences, to respect the older or the elder, to respect.
Can you clarify? So you mean elderly?
The elderly, absolutely. The elderly.
Okay. I just want to make sure you weren't just talking about like older brother or something. You know what I mean?
I'm talking about older brother too.
Oh, okay.
Any age, anybody that's older than you is going to be of a place of respect.
Okay, Jazakallah khair.
Anybody, even if this person is not your brother, even if this, or whether he is your brother, if he's your brother, your older brother, respect him. Unless they're asking you to do the wrong thing, then in that situation, لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. Then in that situation, there's no obedience to anyone that's ordering you for something haram. But to give respect to your older brother, or your older sister, that's part of Islam. That's part of Islam. That's the adab of Islam. And I would say it's sad that with the isolation of a lot of Sufi practices, I think we lost a lot of adab. I think we're so focused on what ilm says that we lost that ilm is not just narrowed down in information, but ilm is also related to adab, is also related to adab and akhlaq, and how we relate with ourselves, how we relate with our tongues, how we relate with our ears, how we relate with the other people. And unfortunately, I think we see even in the masajids, we're seeing even the debate, and people are just debating about whether this is a bid'ah and not a bid'ah, and they don't even have the adab of respect, even adab al-ikhtilaf. They're so fixated on different matters that the adab is completely gone. And when there's no adab, there's no mannerism, there's no respect to one another, then what you're going to see is people starting to get into arrogance. What does arrogance bring? Arrogance brings il-kibr. Il-kibr brings in-nar. Il-kibr brings that you would forget to scrutinize your own sins, scrutinize your own self, rather than just scrutinizing people's mistakes or probably people's wrong interpretation according to you. But you have to respect even those that you disagree with, learning how to be humble, learning how to recognize that you may be so fixated on the argument, but winning the heart is more important. Teaching those adab, I think, is definitely missing within our societies. And it's really sad to see that there's this Sufi, Salafi type of conflict when it should be not a conflict, but it should be that we would embrace and learn from one another. Definitely, Sufis, I would say, have the best adab. They definitely have the best adab and focus on the adab. And we're missing out on that. We're missing out on teaching us how to have adab with our tongues, how to have adab with the people that surround us, how to have adab in learning how to prolong our silence, how to prolong our relationship with dunya, how to prolong or how to, well, it's not prolong our relationship with dunya, but it's reduce our relationship with dunya and prolong our relationship with akhirah. That's the adab that we should be focused on. لا تسألوا عن أشياء إن تبد لكم تسؤكم. So yes, Noura is saying that's why I love the hadith, because it teaches us manners. Absolutely. This is extremely important. Certainly, learning the adab, and here the Prophet ﷺ was teaching us the adab. إن الله حرم عليكم عقوق الأمهات ووأد البنات ومنعا وهات وكره لكم ثلاثا قيل وقال وكثرة السؤال وإضاعة المال. That the Prophet ﷺ had said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forbid that you would disrespect the mothers. And we talked about that. And infanticide, female infanticide, and taking things, or just wanting to collect things, and just wanting to take more and more and more of things, just wanting to take more of dunya. You've got enough clothes, but no, I want more. And you go shopping, not for the sake of wanting something or needing something, but no, we're just shopping, just wandering around in the malls. It's really sad to see, I would, those rare times that I went shopping in the malls, I would always see Muslim girls in numbers of 8, 10, 12, just walking in the mall. What are they doing walking in the mall? Just walking in the mall. That's it. They're just walking in the mall. And just wandering in the mall. And then the mothers would wonder, well, yeah, she's, it's a bunch of, whether it's Palestinian girls or Pakistani girls. I more saw Arab, sorry. I more saw Arab girls than saw Pakistani girls, but had seen, this is a problem. I don't know. I don't understand how the mothers would allow their daughters to just, even if she's hanging out with another Arabi girl or another Muslim girl, why are they wandering around in the mall? What for? If there's something to buy, needed, I don't know, some clothes for, I guess, some occasion, etc. Well, there's nothing wrong with it, going to basically shop for such an outfit or whatever it is, but to just wander for the sake of wandering is problematic. You might say, well, she's not doing anything haram. It's lacking adab. Okay, she's probably just walking around in the mall. She didn't go into probably haram, but it's lacking adab. And this is one important thing. There's something called khawarim al-muru'ah. Let me talk about this for just a bit. It's not just Arab, many cultures. I'm not saying, it's not just Arab, but I must say maybe the area that I was living in was mainly, I would say, the Arab. So, maybe if you were to go in an area that probably had many Bengalis, you would see that. Afghanis, maybe you would see that, but I just saw that. Okay. There is something called khawarim al-muru'ah. What is khawarim al-muru'ah? Khawarim al-muru'ah is not necessarily something haram. What is al-khawarim? Al-khawarim are basically the things that would cause loopholes. Al-muru'ah is integrity, is basically honor. So when you would see a number of different loopholes inside a person's honor, it becomes a person that had embraced khawarim al-muru'ah. Khurm is one. Khurm, that's the singular of khawarim. It's khurm. Khurm means one loophole. Al-muru'ah is basically is honor. So when you're looking at khawarim al-muru'ah, we're talking about different practices that would make a loophole within the person's honor. In other words, it reduces from their integrity, it reduces from their honor, it reduces from their relationship, at least, with something that is higher than the limit. What is the limit? The limit is halal haram. But when you're going farther, probably in the area that's not necessarily haram, but it's going to be, let's call it, this dark spot that will affect the person's deen. It will affect their behavior. It will expand their wants in dunya. It will expand their wants in dunya at the expense of akhirah. So if you're shopping frequently, then that actually means, or you're just wandering around in the malls frequently, that means this is at the expense that you were supposed to be spending time, perhaps, in learning your deen, in helping your mother at home, in learning what is necessary for you to learn, perhaps when you become a mother, when you become a wife, maybe when you are probably doing something important. That's going to be at the expense of that. So if you're just using your time in a way that is not wise, that's going to be at the expense of what should have been an investment to help you become a better person. And that's why one of the reasons we're seeing more failed marriages. We're seeing more failed marriages because the mothers are not doing their job in teaching and limiting that adab and that tarbiyah piece of it. It's not an issue of just putting hijab. It's an issue of limiting their relationship with dunya and expanding their relationship with responsibility, because that's the integrity piece of it. So this man'an wahat is, hey, you're reducing the amount that you're wanting more and more of things. This is part of adab. This is part of tarbiyah that we really missed out on, is to learn how to give of the things that you have and the things that you owe, and how to reduce from the things that you want. This is the adab that we're really missing out on, the discipline that even part of our parenting, not everything that you want, you must get. Not everything that you see your friends have that you need to get. The more you get of dunya, the less you'll find yourself wanting of akhirah. And this is important to keep in mind, that the adab that we're really missing out in tarbiyah, even in al-masajid. I know many will see it as, oh, you're being too strict. That's too old-fashioned, etc. Guess what? The old-fashioned, the simple people, they had better adab than us. The older generations, the simple societies, they definitely have better adab there than us. They definitely have better ikhlas. They definitely have pure hearts than those of sophisticated cultures, let's say it that way, modern cultures. See these people in those simple societies. And what I mean by simple, I would say poor societies. They don't have what the modern societies have, but you will see that they're focused within. They're focused within. They're focused on Alhamdulillah, even though they barely have anything at home, but they'll say Alhamdulillah. They learned that satisfaction is within and not getting more to be satisfied. They learned that to be happy is within and not necessarily to get more and more of materialistic things. They learned that to be a person of integrity is within and is not necessarily a suit that you would appear in. They learned that Iman is within, not by pretending to be a person of faith when you truly are not. They learned that honesty is within and not learning and not being in some type of a political correctness or whatever it is. They learned that simple words of honesty is more important than sophisticated words of lies. Subhanallah, we're really missing out on that. We're really missing out on such tarbiyah in our masajid and even in our homes. It's so sad to see that so many times we could be so fixated on, let's call it the academic side of learning Islam, that we really forgot that these disciplines are actually an integral part of Islam. They're part of Islam because they are what the Prophet ﷺ himself was teaching us. Man'an wahat. Don't forbid and prevent and hold on to the things that you're supposed to be sharing. When you look at man'an wahat, there's a special emphasis. What is man'an? When you prevent sharing, or what you're supposed to be giving, you're keeping. In hat, you're trying to keep things, you're trying to get more of things. When you look at that man'an wahat, what are you looking at? You're looking at the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us, the Prophet ﷺ was teaching us that the society that is centered around keeping things, collecting things, and that collecting more of dunya, that's basically a key thing that would harden the hearts. that would make our hearts lose their connection with akhirah. How much time are you spending on your reels, on your phone, and what are you listening to? How much money are you spending in probably buying clothes and buying food? What does your pantry have? What are you eating? How much do you weigh? And how much do you spend in energy in working with your friends and just joking around? What are you really talking about? All of that is part of man'an wahat. It's not just materialistic things, but it's also how you're using your money, how you're using your energy, how you're using your time. Those are the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have the malaika ask us about in the grave. That's the first thing. You would not pass the grave until you're asked about 4 different things: the knowledge and what you had done with it, the money, your youthhood, especially the time. What did you do with it? The energy. That's basically the energy. What did you use your energy in? And especially the youthhood energy. When you had the most time, when you're 14, 15, 16, 17, up until probably age 28, those were the prime times that you had the most energy. You had the most the most time. Those were the times that you had your prime fitness. What did you do with it? How did you use your time during that time? We would think, oh, those ones are basically at that time, it's okay. When they get 40, they'll get into their deen. No. Those are the prime times that are going to determine who you are when you're 40 and 50. That 40, that's why the Prophet ﷺ talked about the sab'atun yudhilluhum Allah yawma la dhilla illa dhilluh. The 7 that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would shade his shade. And part of them, he mentioned shabun nasha'a fi ibadatillah. A youth, a man that basically grew up from their early childhood in worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What did they do? They basically invested their energy, invested their time, invested their focus, invested whatever they could do, and they just basically used and completely invested their time to use the most and the best of their energy for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya Rabbi. Can't beat that. Because even when you get older, you're not going to have the same time. You're going to have a lot of responsibilities to work on. You're going to have and when we're speaking about responsibilities, it's time consuming, it's energy consuming, it's mind consuming, it's basically taking away your focus. You're trying to do the best, and trust me, the best is all. There are certain times where even your best is not enough. And your husband will come at you and say, you're still not doing enough. And there's no more to do. What am I going to do? I've invested all my energy. I can't do more than this. And you'll say that it's still not enough. So what and how can I make this not happen to me? During your early teenhood, your teenage is not a time for hangout, but it is a time for investment. That's the prime time of your shabun nasha'a fi ibadatillah. That's the prime time for shabab. And we have to teach them that. Not because you're 13, oh, it's too hard for me to understand, or I'm 13 or 14, I don't need to wash the dishes. No, learn how to wash the dishes. Learn how to clean your room. Learn how to clean the bathroom. Not just, oh, I already know how to do it. No. It's not enough to learn how to do it. It's to learn how to be consistent in hygiene, how to be consistent in watching what you eat, how to be consistent in being responsible. That's what it means to be responsible. It's really to learn how to be consistent. And here's a question. So should we hang out with the poor? Should we hang out with the elderly? The answer is absolutely. Remember the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ had said اللهم إني أسألك فعل الخيرات وترك المنكرات وحب المساكين. There's no way that you can get to the level of حب المساكين if you don't have a relationship with them. Well, what does حب المساكين means? You love المساكين. How do I love المساكين? Be around them. Work with them. Give them hugs. Learn how to share food with them. Learn how not to be disgusted, to eat with them, to share laughters, to share a meal, to sit with them. Yes, they probably don't have the cleanest clothes, but learn how, maybe not the cleanest hands because they don't have the water. But learn how to be humble. Learn how to be humble. Learn how to just keep your adab of being a person of tawadu, a person of tazkiyah, a person that recognizes what it means to be in a place of hubb al-masakin, loving al-masakin. And that's why when you look at Allahumma inni as'aluka fi'al al-khairat, Ya Allah, I ask you to give me the ability to do what is right. You will not be capable of doing what is right or leaving what is wrong unless you shed away and take away the arrogance. How do you take away the arrogance? You learn how to be a person that loves al-masakin. Surround yourself with al-masakin. وَكَرِهَ لَكُمْ ثَلَاثًا قِيلًا وَقَالًا. He hated three things for you. One, she said and he said and all of that. كَثْرَةَ السُّؤَالِ, asking too many questions of trivial questions. And I would get this frequently. People would be asking me questions, not for the sake of wanting to seek ilm, but for the sake of just gotcha, or wanting to somehow sending questions just for the sake of wanting to put you down or wanting to humiliate you. And that's not the adab. Of course, unless it's an arrogant person that's going to think that they know the answer to every single question. Of course, we don't know the answer to every single question. Of course, we might have to do research. Of course, we have to be humble and recognize that there's more to the question probably than what was asked. There's no doubt about that. وإضاعة المال. What is إضاعة المال? إضاعة المال, just spending time, just wandering around. And if you look at this hadith, it is really right there, that main area. القيل القال, كثرة السؤال, إضاعة المال, wandering and wasting money. That's where a lot of our teenage girls and boys, that's where a lot of it is wasted in. Boys spending hours in gaming. Haram al-waqt, we would say. Haram. Your youthhood, your prime time, you're wasting it on virtual gaming and thinking that you managed to overcome and be successful in a game. La ilaha illallah. Haram al-waqt. By the time we're seeing men in their 30s, but ahlam al-asafir, but their dreams are birds' dreams. What? It's to get food. It's basically to just hang out. Children, you go to these places once in a while of entertainment, and you're seeing a large number of children. And I'm talking about, maybe I shouldn't call them children because they're men. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old boys jumping on these trampolines and singing and dancing and playing these electronic games, and you're wondering, Ahlam al-Asafir. Tariq ibn Ziyad actually conquered Spain, and he was only 19 years old. That's what Islam wants of men. By the age of 17 and 18 and 19, they're already, Usama ibn Zayd was leading an army to face a superpower at the time, the Byzantine Empire, when he was only 19. And you look at al-Shafi'i, you look at al-Bukhari, you look at, that's what Islam wants of us. But there's no way that we can discipline and get our children to become such if they're wasting their time in just منعا وهات and قيل and قال, كثرة السؤال, and wasting money and disrespecting the mothers and disrespecting the parents. Go ahead, Noura.
Sorry, I just wanted to say some advice. The sheikh told my son, Adam, he told him, he said, for every because not everybody is يعني, at that level, but he said for every hour, that you're spending on the gaming, spend 1 hour on the deen, studying the deen.
Right.
And he gave him that tip as an adult, because your parents shouldn't have to, you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Yeah. Like he gave him the initiative to discipline himself.
So I don't know if it's 1 hour to 1 hour. I think that's maybe in the beginning. I think he could do more. I definitely, knowing your home, I would probably disagree with that ratio, because I know what Yusuf was doing. So with that ratio, I would definitely disagree with it, because Yusuf was doing a lot more. And I know
I'm just saying generally, they do.
Right. Right, mashallah. I'm sure they know more. And mashallah, you guys, mashallah, your children, mashallah, they definitely come from a very smart ancestry. And I really think they could do a lot more than that. Mashallah, I mean, Yusuf is my baby. So I would just say Yusuf is your older son. So for those that are listening to this, mashallah, I know, from one child to another, we would probably give a starter, maybe this 1 hour, maybe. But for somebody that is intelligent, I might actually reduce the ratio and say 3 hours of investment, I'll probably give you 20 minutes. 3 hours of studying, 3 hours of investment. I make my kids do reading. One, they would do memorization. Two, we would also do reading, like 30 pages. We would work together, get the vocabulary out together. We would guess the vocabulary. And then we would look up that meaning and we would write it down. And then they would have to memorize the vocabulary. Then they would have to do Arabic coursework. And then they would have to do some certain task at home, like washing dishes, doing the laundry. Yes, even boys would wash the dishes. Even boys would do the laundry, clean their bathrooms, just work at home. And then to get 20 minutes of playing games. So they would have to do all these tasks to play 20 minutes, or to probably sometimes, if they do a really good job, I might actually add another 20 minutes, maybe 40 minutes to do all these tasks. And they recognize it's all about how you discipline your child, and it's all about how you maintain the structure. They recognize it in the beginning. They may actually, I would say, try to go into type of a revolution. I'm not going to do it. I don't want this. It's on every single time you might want to add another task. And in the beginning, no, I'm not gonna, and try to, I guess, cause somewhat of a type of revolution. But definitely the husband or the father, the fatherly role is very important, because of course the fathers, they basically are, let's call them the, I would say the Ministry of Defense. the father is the Ministry of Defense, and the mother comes in as, I guess, the Ministry of Interior, whatever it is, to kind of get some things in place. But then Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Interior, they have to work together to make sure that we don't get a revolution going against us. So yeah, we have to collaborate with one another. Sorry, ladies, I guess I'm going into so much into right now into making it like a government type of thing. And definitely the population is basically.
And we're gonna be having a Tarbiyah class, inshallah, in the spring.
Inshallah. All right, let's see. قال كثير من العلماء المراد بقوله وكثرة السؤال التكثير من السؤال في المسائل الفقهية تنطعا وتكلفا فيما لم ينزل. I want to just translate this one. That's why I read it in Arabic. So a lot of scholars, they said what is referred to by the word كثرة السؤال, which is basically in the ayah, or in the hadith right there, كثرة السؤال, what does it mean to ask too many questions? He said it's basically asking too many questions, whether in matters in fiqh, but تنطعا. What does it mean, تنطعا? That the reason why this person is asking questions on fiqh, not because they're wanting to learn, but it's because they're wanting to basically debate, or wanting to stalk, and wanting to just really waste time. So that's تنطعا. And وتكلفا فيما لم ينزل. And sometimes it's wanting to be, I guess, pretentious. This person is wanting to ask questions not for the sake of learning, but it's just trying to create hypothetical questions. I remember one time, these kind of questions that some scholars would be tested historically and being asked these questions and what they would rule on it. And I would have these students come to me and, it's kind of like, let me ask these kind of questions that only, those rare instances where those great, magnificent scholars had these, magnificent wisdom to answer those kind of questions. And they would bring them to me. It's like, are you serious? Do you actually think that such a question would be posed to me? But I would say, well, there are differences of opinions, but then they will come to you and sometimes just wanting to test you. That's lacking adab, really. That's really lacking adab, to come in just to test the person, to somehow making it as if it's a gotcha, because it's and when a person or the scholar might say differences of opinions, and then they would want to just make the person humiliated, that's not adab. That's not adab. If you see that even if it's a scholar, no matter who you're asking, if you see that they're probably lacking the ilm and probably are showing signs that they need to do further study, show the adab and don't humiliate that teacher. Don't humiliate that teacher. Give them the time to research. And it's definitely an adab from the teacher to also say, I need to do further research. I need to probably investigate more. I see what you're saying. It is an adab from the teacher to say, I think I need to do more research. But it's also an adab to not corner the teacher with questions or corner people with questions just to humiliate them. Okay, والأغلطات وتشقيق المولدات, which basically comes within that area, trying to, I guess, ask these questions, hypothetical questions, trying to go into certain details, not for the sake of knowledge, but just for the sake of either humiliating the teacher or probably just wanting to create a mess within the class, etc. And that's basically when we talk about kathrat al-su'al, that's basically within the perimeter of not having that adab. Let's see, Malik, who's Malik? Well, Malik ibn Anas, who died 179 Hijriya. He said, I had I had lived in the city, basically in Medina, because that's where he used to live in. And he said the only knowledge that they would have is really asking about what is in the Quran and what is in the Sunnah. And if there was any matter that probably happened, which is basically called Nazila. What is Nazila? So in Nazila would be a new issue that did not happen before, and it did not have a previous fatwa in regards to it, and therefore required a new investigation, a new scrutiny, a new research to see what the ruling in regards to this new thing that happened is. And therefore, the Amir, who would be, whether it's the leader within that area, the deputy, whatever you call him, and he would basically combine the scholars. I want you to look at this one. He wouldn't just ask one, but he would gather the scholars to discuss this together. Well, how do we understand the ruling in relationship to what the new thing had happened is, and then if they had basically agreed on a certain ruling, then that becomes what they would apply. And if they basically had probably disputed, they would research the matter, and the Prophet ﷺ hated, and so did the Sahaba later learned that it's hated to just continue this just for the sake of argument, just for the sake of just wasting time, to continue in putting out hypothetical questions just to waste and argue about things. Okay, but of course, there are some opinions that said that no, kathrat as-su'al is asking about people's matters and just being persistent in asking about people's personal matters, and certainly things that are not related to you, and perhaps with the intention to probably get into their privacies, or probably just scrutinize the wrong things that they had done, and etc. And that's part of tajassus, that's part of ghaiba, that's part of spying, that's part of getting into people's businesses, and that's not the adab. This is important. This is not the adab. And certainly, we did talk about Ibn Khuwaizim Mandad, and who's a scholar of the Maliki madhab, but from Iraq. So just remember this name, okay? And he talked about whenever, for example, certain foods are presented, they would start questioning things. But of course, this is where we left off at, really. But still, because it's been a couple days, so we're going to get into it. Ibn al-Arabi, Ibn al-Arabi is who? Is he that Ibn Arabi Sufi guy? No. Ibn Arabi is different than Ibn al-Arabi. Ibn Arabi was that Sufi figure, okay? Ibn Arabi. It was that Sufi figure, that guy, Futuhat al-Makkiyah. Okay, that I would say scholars disputed on whether he's kafir or not. I'll just leave it at that.
Is that the one they always put in the Turkish?
Yeah, right. There you go.
Yeah.
Good girl. That's exactly. And scholars actually debated whether he's kafir or not, simply because he used a lot of, I would say, language that is rather containing some ambiguity, a lot of metaphors. And when you use a lot of metaphors, you're using a lot of ambiguity. It can be misunderstood. And when it's misunderstood, you can put yourself in an area of question. So that's why حدثوا الناس بما يفقهون. Talk to people with what they're capable of understanding, and don't get into questions and matters and speak about them in ways of ambiguity to sometimes, without you realizing, you were making things more sophisticated. But be simple in your speech, because if you are misunderstood, then that's going to be problematic, because if you are misunderstood, you would definitely put in a label that you did not expect to be put in. So yes, I know that what I had probably said today in regards to Sufism and Salafism and all of that, it could easily be misunderstood. So I tried as much as I can to make it as, I don't want to say the word inclusive, but I can't find any other word. But okay, now I'm going to an oxymoron right there. But I think it's important to also recognize the contributions that a lot of the scholars had invested within our ummah, regardless of which groups they're affiliated to, is important. So Ibn al-Arabi, a Maliki scholar, and just like I would say the words of a Maliki scholar, or I would say the words of a Shafi'i scholar, etc., just like I'm inclusive to madhahib, I'm also inclusive to the different groups, probably the ones that focused on tazkiyah and the focused on ilm and focused on certain perhaps activism, etc. I think it's important that we would learn how to embrace the different Muslim contributions, because only then will we be capable of creating a unity within our Muslim ummah. Only then will we take away the arrogance and live with our tazkiyah to recognize the contributions that the different madhahib, that the different scholars had contributed within our ummah, and only then will we be capable of bringing in many, now this is metaphorical, many candles to basically light all around us. And of course, the more candles, the more light for us to take away all the darkness that we're living in during our times, whether it's political darkness, injustices, or whether it's the haram that we're living in, etc. All of that is basically going to be removed by more and more light contributions, to mean ilm contributions, to mean tazkiyah contributions, to mean contributions of shedding how to collaborate with one another in order to remove all the jahiliyyah, to remove all the muharramat, to remove all the different dhulumat and darknesses that we're living in. Ibn al-Arabi had said, look at this one. اعتقد قوم من الغافلين تحريم أسئلة النوازل حتى تقع تعلقا بهذه الآية، وليس كذلك، لأن هذه الآية مصرحة بأن السؤال المنهي عنه إنما كان فيما تقع المساءة في جوابه. What was happening here? Now, the response that al-Qurtubi said, قلت قوله اعتقد قوم من الغافلين فيه قبح، وإنما كان الأولى به أن يقول ذهب قوم إلى تحريم أسئلة النوازل لكنه جرى على عادته. Look at this one. A little, let me explain to you what happened. So Ibn al-Arabi, what is he saying? He said, some of the ignorant ones, they basically thought that asking questions of matters that didn't happen before was wrong, and they depended on this ayah, and that is actually not accurate, or that is not actually true, because the ayah was really clear that what is haram in questioning about is basically what would bring or what would result in bringing harm. And there's nothing wrong with asking questions about the different matters that might happen, and therefore those are two different issues. The response and the comment that al-Qurtubi wanted to comment on, he said his word and his comment, and when he said اعتقد قوم من الغافلين, that some of the ignorant people had thought, in his commentary, he said فيه قبح, that basically is somehow containing a derogatory statement, and that you shouldn't call these people as ghafilin, as people that are ignorant. But he should have said, look at the adab. He said, it would have been better if he would have said, ذهب قوم. It would have been better if he would have said, instead of some of the ignorant ones have thought, would have been better if you would use ذهب قوم إلى تحريم أسئلة النوازل. He said it would have been better if you would have said that certain groups had basically considered that it is impermissible to ask questions about matters that happened recently or matters that were not discussed previously. But he said لكنه جرى على عادته. But I guess he basically wanted to say, well, he had a habit of probably commenting on some scholars as those that disagreed with him, as probably naming them certain names. He said, وإنما قلنا, look at the adab, وإنما قلنا كان الأولى به لأنه قد كان قوم من السلف يكرهها. Enough said. He said, and the reason why we said it was better, it would have been better if he would have said, كان قوم من السلف, that some people from the predecessors, meaning the scholars before, they used to hate, it would have been better if he would said, if you would have said, some had hated that. It's because there were some salaf, sahaba, some scholars, that's what they had said. So to call them and improbably include them as part of al-ghafilin is problematic. Now this is important because it can happen that many times that we could say a matter has differences of opinions, and we can say, well, this is preponderant and this is not the preponderant, and we can get carried away sometimes and say this is wrong and this is not part of Islam, when guess what? It was probably one of the Sahaba that even said that opinion. Are you going to say that that's not part of Islam? So learning the adab of how to make your statements. Sometimes you could make a statement that probably lacks adab with the ulama, or probably lacks adab with the salihin. And this is starting to become more common, that you would see some people that probably read a book on fiqh here and there, or a book of hadith here and there, and a book of ilm here and there, and would think that they had all the ilm. And they would easily say, this opinion is not part of Islam. I'll give you an example. Uncovering the face. That anybody that would say that uncovering the face, for women, of course, that this is a bid'ah and that this is not acceptable. On the other hand, saying that covering the face is extreme. Both ways are actually lacking adab, because there are scholars that said that covering the face, the least of it is that it's sunnah. No scholar ever said that covering the face is not part of Islam. And to say that the women that uncover their faces, that this is going against Islam, is also not embracing that scholars, there are great scholars that actually said that it's permissible for women to uncover their faces, and it's only obligatory on the women that are exceptionally beautiful. Well, that's an opinion. So to say it in this way and to say it in that other way is basically extreme and lacking adab. No, the opinion that said that uncovering the face is permissible is a considerable opinion. And the scholars that said that it's a sunnah, the least of it, or it's obligatory, it's part of Islam. Yes, it's a considerable opinion that Sahaba had even said. So to lack the adab in the way that we would embrace these differences of opinions, and lack the adab in the words that we might, without us realize, attack great scholars, is dangerous. So how do I know that I'm using my words right? Seek ilm. Seek ilm. Take the time to learn fiqh, to learn hadith, to learn all of that. let's see. And al-Qurtubi said, because the reason why he objected to the word اعتقد قوم من الغافلين, he said, well, because Umar ibn al-Khattab, certainly he used to curse whoever would ask about a matter that didn't even happen. Hey, are you going to make a derogatory statement on Umar ibn al-Khattab right there? Absolutely not. And it was mentioned, Darimi had mentioned this narration in his Musnad, and it was mentioned that Zayd ibn Thabit al-Ansari, whenever, of course, كان يقول إذا سئل عن أمر أكان هذا فإن قالوا نعم قد كان حدث فيه بالذي يعلم وإن قالوا لم يكن قال فذروه حتى يكون. What happened? Here it is. ذكر عن زيد ibn Thabit al-Ansari, a Sahabi. Whenever they would get a matter and they would start asking, he would say, did this happen? And then they would say, if they said, yes, it did happen, then that's when he would do his research, his fiqh research, his ijtihad to answer the question. But if they had said, no, such a thing didn't happen, but it's a hypothetical question, that is, then he would say, فَذَرُوهُ حَتَّى يَكُونَ. If it does happen, just leave it. If it does happen, that's when we'll use our ijtihad tools. But if it didn't happen yet, then don't ask about it until it really happens. Playing out these hypothetical questions in fiqh, it's like, here you've got some of these scholars. And same thing when you look at same thing when Ammar ibn Yasir, when he was asked about a matter, he said, did this really happen? They said, no. He said, دعونا حتى يكون فإذا كان تجشمناها لكم. Ammar ibn Yasir, same thing. He said, when they would come and ask him some questions, he said, did this really happen? They said, no, we just, it's just like a hypothetical question. He said, if it does happen, then you would come forward and ask us about it. And we would do our تجشمناها لكم. In other words, we'll do our investigation, we'll do our ijtihad for it, and we'll give you the answer to it. And hey, these are Sahaba, Ammar ibn Yasir, Zayd ibn Thabit al-Ansari, Umar ibn al-Khattab, and certainly Abdullah ibn Abbas. Basically, ما رأيت قوما كانوا خيرا من أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما سألوه إلا عن 13 مسألة حتى قبض كلهن في القرآن. Ibn Abbas, he said, I did not see any group of people that were better than the Prophet ﷺ's companions. They only asked about 13 different matters until he died. All of those matters were in the Quran. Part of them. يسألونك عن الشهر الحرام. يسألونك عن الشهر الحرام. They asked عن الشهر الحرام, about الشهر الحرام. Why? Because it was a common practice at the time that الشهر الحرام were considered 4 months. They're not allowed to engage in jihad, not allowed to fight, not allowed to in any of that. But the ayah was revealed, or the ayat in Surah al-Anfal or in Surah al-Tawbah were revealed in order to basically bring about a final statement in regards to how do we understand al-Ashhur al-Hurum, the previous practices, and what we're asked to do. And another ayah, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ, they ask you about the menstrual bleeding and how you should relate to it, because the Jewish practices were confusing them. Are we supposed to be doing the same thing, or how do we relate with women during those times when they would be menstruating? مَا كَانُوا يَسْأَلُونَ إِلَّا عَمَّا يَنْفَعُهُم. So they would only ask about the matters. They only asked about 13 matters, and they would only ask about the matters that were beneficial. It wasn't just for the sake of asking just questions. And here's Noura asking a question, but it helped science. It developed science and fiqh, right? Okay, so that's a very good question, Noura. Should these hypothetical questions, that's where, let's say, that answer to your question is coming in with what Ibn Abdul Barr is saying. He said, السؤال اليوم لا يخاف منه أن ينزل تحريم ولا تحريم من أجله. فمن سأل مستفهما راغبا في العلم ونفي الجهل عن نفسه باحثا عن معنى يجب الوقوف في الديانة عليه فلا بأس به، فشفاء العي السؤال. ومن سأل متعنتا غير متفقه ولا متعلم فهو الذي لا يحل قليل سؤاله ولا كثير. يا سلام. That's to answer your question, Nora. What is he saying? He said, asking today about matters that, of course, we're not going to have a new ayah being revealed in regards to whether this is haram or whether this is halal. In other words, there's no new restrictions that are going to be revealed, and therefore, if the person is asking questions to learn more or to remove probably the ignorance, or perhaps we're bahithan an ma'nan, or perhaps we're researching a matter where we are trying to probably investigate because this is a religious issue. These are real questions that we probably need to lay foundations for in order to perhaps lay a new science in how we investigate, how we would basically canonize fiqh, etc. He said this would be فَلَا بَأْسَ بِهِ. Then there's nothing haram in that, because the only way that we could cure our ignorance is by laying out questions, even that is hypothetical questions. But for those that would ask questions, متعنتا. What is it, ta'annut? Ta'annut is basically out of arrogance, or they're not seeking to learn, they're not seeking to get more of understanding the deen. Then that's basically the questioning, that whether it's a small question or whether it's numerous set of questions, those are the type of questions that we definitely don't need. Those are the type of questions that's basically haram. Okay, but the type of questions, okay, let's see. قال ابن العربي, what is important for the alim, for the scholar to basically invest their energy in, is to put in the evidences, clarify how we would investigate these matters, and certainly in order to teach and lay out the different paradigms on what would be key to learning how to investigate different matters. In other words, we're laying out kind of what we would call today as academic studying. So Ibn al-Arabi was saying, well, laying out such academic research, whether we're speaking about evidences, scrutinizing let's call them the paradigms and how we understand ijtihad, how we understand going to rulings, and understand how the resources of ilm happen, and certainly the tools for getting more ilm and investigation. All of that, of course, is basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open the doors for us to learning more. Let's read that in Arabic so we could learn how to do that. الذي ينبغي للعالم أن يشتغل به هو بسط الأدلة وإيضاح سبل النظر وتحصيل مقدمات الاجتهاد وإعداد الآلة المعينة على الاستمداد. يا حبيبي على كلمة الاستمداد. فإذا عرضت نازلة أوتيت من بابها ونشدت في مظانها والله يفتح في صوابها. Can't get better than that. Okay, so I just translated. I wouldn't say a very detailed translation. I just gave a general translation. Utiyat min babiha means we would basically discuss it within that particular chapter, within that particular, of course, context of it. Nushidat fi madhanniha, we would look into all the different contexts that relate to it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will basically open the doors to learning more about it. And that's what would explain وَإِن تَسْأَلُوا عَنْهَا حِينَ يُنَزَّلُ الْقُرْآنِ تُبْدَ لَكُمْ. And that's what would explain that this opinion, wallahu a'lam, is preponderant. So it's okay to put forward hypothetical questions in order to learn the academia of learning how to investigate and all of that. This isn't haram, because what was the context at the time, during the time of the Sahaba, that they were not supposed to investigate and bring about basically more restrictions, and that the person was supposed to get the adab to ask questions during the time of the Sahaba, to ask the questions if necessary. And that's why they asked about 13 questions when certain ayat were probably ambiguous, or certain matters were important to know the detail of. I'm not really sure whether it's this or that. The word is still not clear to us. That's why they asked the Prophet ﷺ about 13 different matters, and it was revealed in the Quran or even revealed in the Hadith. So that's why وَإِن تَسْأَلُوا عَنْهَا حين ينزل القرآن تبد لكم. And of course, that's in order to explain it to us. And that's why the scholars then, وَإِن تَسْأَلُوا عَنْهَا. So should we ask about it? Or is this asking about other matters? Is this anha, the pronoun anha, on it? So what does that mean? This is to say that this anha is not referring to the ashya. Wait, what? Okay, let me explain that. So it says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, oh, you who believe, don't ask about things unless, because if it were to be revealed, it might basically put more restrictions and harm you, okay? Then, وَإِن تَسْأَلُوا عَنْهَا, but if you were to ask about it, now, in English, and in most of the default in Lugha Arabiya, whenever you would have a pronoun it, this damir al-ghaib, then you're going to get to the closest mentioned noun, which is ashya. But in Lugha Arabiya, that usually is the case, but not always the case. Prove it. Certainly. Al-Jurjani, who is considered one of the most important scholars in Lugha Arabiya. Yeah, we need to learn about Al-Jurjani. So Al-Jurjani, one of the most important scholars in Lugha Arabiya, his name is, maybe I can let you see that right there. Got you some things prepared about Al-Jurjani, just so that we would say what he's saying. Okay, Abu al-Hasan Ali bin Abd al-Aziz Al-Jurjani. He was faqih, meaning a scholar of fiqh, and Shafi'i. Look at that. So who are we talking about here? Al-Maliki al-Qurtubi is now taking in a contribution from a Shafi'i, or a Shafi'i scholar. His name is Al-Jurjani. Okay? صاحب الديوان المشهور. He basically had a long poem that was known. He wasn't just a scholar of Lugha Arabiya, but he was also a scholar of fiqh, to basically even rule and become a judge. And he said he even had very beautiful handwriting. Okay, now the most important thing is to basically let you know that Al-Jurjani was a great scholar of Lugha Arabiya, of fiqh, etc. Just wanting to see at least that piece of it. But it's توفي في 23 من ذي الحجة 396 هجرية. ووهم ابن خليكان. Khalikan or Khalikan. Differences of opinions on how his name is mentioned. Who's Ibn Khalikan? He's one of the scholars who lived in Dimashq, Allahu Akbar, but he was of a Kurdish origin. Okay, he was of a Kurdish origin, and just to mention that one, he is actually one of those scholars that was an encyclopedia. Okay, Ibn Khalikan or Khalikan, he was a scholar, lived in Dimashq, Kurdish origin, one of Wafat al-A'yan. He basically wrote a whole encyclopedia just on the different biographies of different important people. He had mentioned that he had died 366, and you could see right there, Dhahabi wanted to correct, I guess, Ibn Khalikan, even though he's a great encyclopedia scholar, but you can see that he said, well, he was wrong in that. So here comes الذهبي right there, wanting to say the year of death for al-Jurjani, that it was 396, and he wanted to say that Ibn Khalikan, he was not accurate in that dating. Okay, so look at the adab, he said wahima. It's like, I probably made a mistake or probably confused something. Okay, the most important point, al-Jurjani. He basically said, al-kinaya fi anha. The pronoun anha here is not referring to ashya because this would be an oxymoron. So what does anha refer to? He said anha as actually referring to other questions related to other matters and not necessarily the matters that relate to what was forbidden. So where's the evidence that this can happen? He said simple. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِّن طِينٍ. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and we had created the human beings from like a series of different development, but he was actually made of clay. And he said it was referring to Adam. But then the ayah, so ayah 12, it was saying that insan, human beings were created from clay, but then it continues to say, ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاهُ. Then we had made him, and this is the pronoun ha right there, nutfa. We had made him into a sperm. And we know that Adam alayhi salam is not referred to here because he was not actually made into a sperm. So he wanted to say, well, just like this pronoun ha is definitely not referring to al-insan Adam, then therefore we can see that certain pronouns may come in even though the context literally would seem that it's referring to as a contradictory thing, because we would know ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاهُ نُطْفَةً, it would seem like it's talking about Adam, and here it's referring to Adam for sure. And he said, well, just like the pronoun can come later and not necessarily referring to the nearest madhkur, to the nearest mentioned noun, and this basically can happen the same way. And therefore, same thing, when we look at that, he said it can happen, and therefore this anha is not referring to the ashya that they were forbidden to ask about, and that this is basically referring to a different matter that they were permitted to ask about. Okay? And of course, فالمعنى,
the more you learn, the more you feel like we don't know anything, subhanAllah.
Trust me, Noura, if we don't get to that feeling that the more you learn, the more you're like, oh man, there's so much to learn. That's the most important thing to get out of adab talab al-ilm, is to recognize that the more you learn, the more you discover that there's so much that you don't know. That's the adab. Alhamdulillah. That's the adab that we all need to get to, and not the other way around. Because seeking ilm, for those that have a problem in their heart, a problem of arrogance, that would make them see that I know more than other people, and now I can boast about it, and I can somehow, belittle others that they don't know. That's a problem of arrogance. That's a problem of kibriya. But a person that has the adab and the tawadu and has that humility will recognize that no, don't look at others that they don't know, but recognize that they're فوق كل ذي علم عليم, that beyond every single scholar there's basically one that knows more, and also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to contain all the ilm, and your ilm within just a matter of a change in your DNA, or probably something in your genes, can get you into getting, who knows, a brain tumor or whatever it is, or dementia or whatever it is, and you'll forget everything. Just when you thought you know it all. Allah al-Musta'an. So we'll end right here. Or maybe let me just finish this point. Basically, then what this means, and let's say the conclusion in regards to understanding this pronoun and what that means, he said, and what that would mean is it would be permissible to ask questions even while the Quran is being revealed, as long as it is needed and basically is needing more explanation, just like when the ayah was revealed, and for the women that basically had stopped menstruating, what is the ruling on it? When they had asked, well, what if they're not menstruating? How are we going to deal with this? So that's when that ayah was revealed. So if there is a need for it, then it would not be haram to ask about it, whether the question, even during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they asked about the waiting period of a woman that is a divorcee, or a woman that her husband died, whether she was pregnant or whether she had a baby, and what would the ruling be. So this was not forbidden by the Prophet ﷺ or even by the ayah to ask about matters that are needed. But what was forbidden is to ask about matters that are not needed and just wasting time, really. And that's why I would say, Afallahu anha. If the person is asking about matters that are needed, then that would be permissible to ask about, and al-afu would mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is dismissing. And certainly, let's look at this one. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى فَرَضَ فَرَائِضَ فَلَا تُضَيِّعُوهَا وَحَرَّمَ حُرُمَاتٍ فَلَا تَنْتَهِكُوهَا وَحَدَّ حُدُودًا فَلَا تَعْتَدُوهَا وَسَكَتَ عَنْ أَشْيَاءَ مِنْ غَيْرِ نِسْيَانٍ فَلَا تَبْحَثُوا عَنْهَا. Let's look at this hadith. This hadith, Sunan al-Daraqutni, you got right there. Let's look at مرفوعا. Okay, انظر جامع العلوم والحكم. So let's see, Ibn Abd al-Barr would probably be a good idea to actually see what he had commented in that regards. Let's see, the quote, the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had obligated certain matters, so do not basically leave it. And he had forbid certain matters, so do not transgress it. And he had limited certain limits, and do not go beyond and transgress, basically. And he was quiet about matters without forgetting it, so don't investigate it. What does that mean? So, for example, why are we praying 4 rakat for duhr? Why not 6? 6 would be better, right? Well, I mean, 6 increase us in our iman. We're doing more of that. Well, no. سكت عن أشياء من غير نسيان. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala limited it to 4. You're going to keep it at that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not forget the numbers and all of that. No. من غير نسيان. فلا تبحثوا عنها. Why is duhr 4? Why is pork haram? You can probably research to see the hikmah. That's all right. You can research that to see the hikmah. Why pork is haram? Why do women, when their husband dies, they would do more in a longer waiting period compared to the women that are probably divorcees? Does anxiety play a role in changing their, I don't know, their hormones, or what really happens? Maybe that would be a good research to research, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're just going to use our research to change the ruling, because this is hadda hududan. It's a limit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala limited. You're not going to change it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had considered certain obligations. You cannot change it. So at the end, all the different reasons and all that, there's supposed to be an adab. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked about certain and had said certain things, then in the end you're just going to leave it and have the adab that you're going to accept it as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically define the different matters, whether halal, haram, a certain had, a certain limit to something, and I'm just going to embrace Islam with that aqidah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically the one that I would submit to in understanding al-hikmah, and also that He is al-Latif al-Khabir. That's it. And if there are any questions, I know we definitely went beyond our time. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to, inshallah, answer those questions. No questions asked? All right. So I'll stop the